Welcome to the world of daily life stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy listening. The Prelude to Chaos. The fluorescent lights at JFK Airport buzzed faintly, casting a cold, clinical glow over Terminal 4. Among the sea of hurried travelers, Sophia Adams stood at the flight crew check-in counter. Her crisp navy uniform and polished demeanor exuded professionalism, but beneath her controlled exterior, she was a woman on edge. 15 years of service in the skies had turned her into a perfectionist, efficient, disciplined, and fiercely intolerant of anything that disrupted her carefully constructed world. "Here you go, Sophia." Jenny, a junior flight attendant, said cheerfully, handing her the day's itinerary. Sophia barely acknowledged her, snatching the folder with a terse nod. "Thanks," she muttered, not bothering to meet Jenny's eyes. Small talk wasn't her thing. She prided herself on being all business, no nonsense, a reputation that earned her both respect and resentment among her colleagues. In the crew room, the air was thick with unspoken tension as her team prepared for the red-eye flight to Los Angeles. Sarah, a senior attendant with a gentle demeanor, glanced at Sophia with a hesitant smile. "Morning, Sophia. How are you?" "Fine," Sophia replied curtly, flipping through her checklist. "Let's get started." But Mark, a junior crew member, cleared his throat. "Actually, Sophia, there's something we need to address before the briefing." Sophia froze mid-check. "What now?" she asked, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "There've been some complaints," Mark began tentatively. "Complaints?" Sophia snapped, her eyes narrowing. "About what?" Mark hesitated, glancing at Sarah for support. "About how you interact with passengers. Some feel your tone is, harsh." Sophia let out a bitter laugh. "Harsh? Do they expect me to coddle them? If someone can't handle being told to follow basic safety rules, that's their problem, not mine." Sarah stepped in gently. "It's not just about rules, Sophia. Yesterday, a passenger said you made their child cry." Sophia scoffed. "The kid was running up and down the aisle during turbulence. Would they rather I let their precious angel crack their skull open?" Mark opened his mouth to respond, but Sophia silenced him with a glare. "Enough. We have a full flight tonight, and I expect everyone to focus on their duties." The pre-flight preparations continued in tense silence, with Sophia barking orders while her team exchanged uneasy glances. As passengers began boarding, she took her position at the cabin door, her smile tight and mechanical. The steady stream of travelers blurred together until one man caught her attention. He was tall, with dark skin and a neatly trimmed beard. His tailored charcoal suit exuded understated elegance, and he moved with a quiet confidence that turned heads. He paused to help an elderly woman stow her bag, earning grateful smiles from onlookers. "Excuse me," he said warmly as he approached Sophia. "Good evening." Sophia barely glanced at him, gesturing toward the back of the plane. "Keep moving, sir. We need to maintain the boarding flow." If her dismissive tone bothered him, he didn't show it. He nodded politely and continued to his seat in business class. Minutes later, as the last passenger settled in, the man pressed the call button. Sophia marched over, irritation etched across her face. "Yes, sir?" "Sorry to bother you," he said, his voice calm and measured. "I was wondering if I could switch to an aisle seat. I have a medical condition that occasionally requires quick access to the lavatory." Sophia sighed, her patience already wearing thin. "Sir, the flight is full, and seat assignments are final. I'm sure you can manage for 6 hours." Several nearby passengers shifted uncomfortably, sensing the growing tension. The man's expression remained calm, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of disappointment. "I understand policies are in place for a reason, but surely there's room for compassion when medical needs are involved." That was the tipping point. Years of pent-up frustration boiled over, and Sophia's voice rose. "Compassion," she said with a bitter laugh. "Here we go, another entitled businessman who thinks the rules don't apply to him. Let me guess, You're used to getting your way with just a flash of your platinum card. The cabin fell silent. Passengers exchanged uneasy glances, and a young woman discreetly began recording the exchange on her phone. The man remained composed, his calm demeanor only fueling Sophia's anger. "Miss Adams," he said softly, reading her name tag. "I'm simply asking for a reasonable accommodation." The slap came without warning. The sharp sound of her palm meeting his cheek echoed through the cabin, followed by a collective gasp. Sophia froze, her hand still raised as the weight of what she'd done sank in. The man's head had barely moved, but a red mark bloomed on his cheek. For a moment, the only sounds were the hum of the plane's engines and the faint clicks of phone cameras capturing the scene. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but carried a weight that silenced the entire cabin. "I own this airline." Gasps rippled through the passengers as the reality of the situation hit them like a freight train. Sophia's face went pale, and her hand dropped limply to her side. Her world, meticulously built on control and discipline, had just crumbled in an instant. The fallout. The silence in the cabin was deafening, broken only by the faint hum of the engines and the clicks of recording devices capturing every detail of the unfolding drama. Sophia Adams stood rooted to the spot, her mind racing as the man she had slapped, Elijah Johnson, sat before her with calm but piercing eyes. His words reverberated in her ears, "I own this airline." It was a declaration, not shouted but stated with unflinching authority. The passengers, previously passive observers, now exchanged wide-eyed glances and hushed whispers. The young woman who had recorded the slap lowered her phone for a moment, her mouth slightly agape, before resuming her video with renewed fervor. Sophia's initial shock began to give way to panic. Her heart pounded as the weight of her actions pressed down on her chest like a stone. She had made mistakes before, curt replies, dismissive gestures, but this? This was catastrophic. Elijah rose slowly from his seat, his every movement deliberate. The red mark on his cheek was unmistakable, a glaring testament to Sophia's lapse in judgment. The cabin seemed to hold its breath as he adjusted his cufflinks and turned to address the passengers. "I'd like to apologize," he said, his voice steady and controlled, "to everyone here for the disruption. This was not the experience you were promised when you chose to fly with us." The calm sincerity of his tone disarmed the tension slightly, but all eyes remained fixed on him. He then turned his gaze back to Sophia, who stood motionless, her hands trembling at her sides. "You have a name tag," he said, gesturing to her chest. "But I don't believe we've been properly introduced." "I'm Elijah Johnson." Sophia's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She had seen his name before, in company newsletters, in media headlines, in industry memos, but it hadn't clicked until now. Elijah Johnson, CEO and majority owner of Horizon Airways. I didn't know," she finally managed to stammer, her voice barely above a whisper. "That much is clear," Elijah replied evenly, though there was no malice in his tone. Sarah, the senior flight attendant, stepped forward, her face pale with anxiety. "Mr. Johnson, please allow me to escort you to another seat or assist you in any way necessary." "We deeply regret." Elijah raised a hand, silencing her. "Thank you, Sarah, but I'm fine right here for now." He then glanced back at Sophia. "However, I think we need to have a conversation, privately." Sophia's legs felt like lead, but she managed to nod. Elijah gestured toward the galley at the front of the plane. The passengers watched intently as the two made their way up the aisle, the weight of judgment heavy on Sophia's shoulders. In the galley. The galley was cramped, the metallic surfaces reflecting the harsh fluorescent light. Sophia stood awkwardly near the counter, avoiding Elijah's gaze. He leaned casually against the wall, arms crossed, studying her with an unreadable expression. "Miss Adams," he began, his tone measured, "do you know what the most important quality in this job is?" Sophia hesitated. "Professionalism?" "Wrong," Elijah said, shaking his head. "It's empathy." The word hung in the air like a challenge. "Empathy is what separates good service from exceptional service," he continued. It's what makes passengers feel safe, valued, and respected. And today, you showed none of it. Sophia bristled at his words, but the sting of truth was undeniable. I was following protocol, she said defensively. The flight was full, and seat changes aren't allowed after boarding. Elijah's expression hardened. Protocol is important, but it's not an excuse for treating someone with contempt. When I asked for an aisle seat, it wasn't about privilege or entitlement. It was a genuine medical need, one I would have been happy to document if given the chance. Sophia felt a surge of shame. She had assumed he was just another demanding passenger, using his status to push boundaries. But she hadn't even paused to listen. I'm sorry, she said quietly, her voice breaking. I let my frustration get the better of me. It's no excuse, but this job, it wears you down. The constant demands, the lack of appreciation, it's hard. Elijah's gaze softened slightly. I understand that. Believe me, I've heard similar stories from other employees. But as difficult as your job may be, you have to remember that you're dealing with people, not problems. Sophia nodded, tears welling in her eyes. She had spent years building walls, shielding herself from the emotional toll of her work. But in doing so, she had lost sight of the humanity behind every passenger's request, complaint, or need. The aftermath begins. When they returned to the cabin, the atmosphere was electric. Passengers whispered in hushed tones, their eyes darting between Elijah and Sophia. Sarah approached Elijah hesitantly. Mr. Johnson, would you like us to contact the ground crew to make arrangements once we land? Elijah shook his head. No need. I'll handle this internally. His words were cryptic, but the implication was clear. Sophia felt her stomach drop. She had no illusions about what handle this internally might mean. The flight proceeded without further incident, but Sophia's mind was in turmoil. Every glance from a passenger felt like an accusation, every whispered conversation like a judgment. When the plane finally touched down in Los Angeles, Sophia stayed behind as the passengers disembarked. Elijah lingered as well, waiting until the cabin was empty, before turning to her one last time. Miss Adams, he said, his tone softer now, you've made a serious mistake. But mistakes, while painful, are opportunities to grow. The question is, what are you going to do with this one? Sophia swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. I don't know, she admitted. Elijah studied her for a moment, then nodded. Think about it. And when you're ready, we'll talk. With that, he turned and walked down the jet bridge, leaving Sophia alone in the empty cabin. The internet storm. By the time Sophia reached her hotel that night, the incident had gone viral. Clips of the slap were all over social media, accompanied by sensational headlines like "Flight Attendant Loses It on Airline CEO," and "Epic Clapback, Billionaire Owns the Airline and the Moment." Sophia stared at her phone in disbelief. The comments were brutal, calling her everything from unprofessional to outright racist. People dissected every detail of the video, speculating on her motives and condemning her actions. But amid the vitriol, there were also posts calling for understanding. Some commenters pointed out the pressures flight attendants face daily, urging others to consider the bigger picture. Sophia wasn't sure which was worse, the criticism or the pity. As she closed her phone and stared out the window at the glittering city below, one thought consumed her: how do I make this right? The path to redemption. Sophia sat in her hotel room, staring at the reflection in the mirror. The person staring back at her looked the same: sharp features, perfectly styled hair, and the same steely blue eyes she saw every day. But tonight, the reflection felt hollow. The weight of her actions and the subsequent fallout bore down on her like an unrelenting tide. Her phone buzzed again, lighting up with yet another notification. Against her better judgment, she picked it up, scrolling through the latest wave of posts. The hashtags were everywhere. Hashtag airline slap. Hashtag CEO clapback. Hashtag empathy in the skies. Her stomach churned as she read the comments. How do you work for someone without knowing who they are? Ridiculous. Maybe this is a wake-up call for her. She clearly needed it. Empathy goes a long way, maybe she should try it sometime. But what stung most were the few comments that dug deeper, questioning her character, her values, and even her upbringing. I wonder what made her so cold, one user wrote. Sophia put the phone down, her chest tightening. That single comment struck a nerve. It wasn't just the incident, it was her life being picked apart by strangers who knew nothing about her struggles, her sacrifices, or the walls she had built to survive. But even as the anger bubbled beneath the surface, a quiet voice in her head whispered, "They're not entirely wrong, are they?" The next morning, facing reality. Sophia's day started early, with a meeting scheduled at Horizon Airways corporate office in downtown Los Angeles. The email had come through late at night, a brief but clear directive from Elijah Johnson himself. Report to HR at 9 a.m. We'll discuss the incident. She arrived at the towering glass building feeling small and vulnerable, a stark contrast to her usual composed self. The receptionist directed her to a sleek conference room where Elijah and 2 HR representatives were already waiting. "Miss Adams," Elijah greeted her, his tone formal, but not unkind. Sophia sat down, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She braced herself for the reprimand she knew was coming, but Elijah's approach surprised her. "I won't rehash what happened," he began. "The world has already done that for us. What I want to focus on now is where we go from here." Sophia blinked, caught off guard. She had expected anger, stern lectures, maybe even immediate termination. Instead, Elijah's voice carried a tone of opportunity. "What do you mean?" she asked hesitantly. Elijah leaned forward, his gaze steady. "You're not the first employee to make a mistake, and you won't be the last. But this isn't just about you. It's about what this incident represents for our company, and how we respond to it." One of the HR representatives, a composed woman named Lila, spoke next. "Sophia, your behavior was unacceptable. However, we've reviewed your record, and it's clear you've been a dedicated employee for many years. This incident highlights a deeper issue we've seen across the company, a need for better training in empathy, conflict resolution, and stress management." Sophia's cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she nodded. I understand," she said softly. "That's why," Elijah continued, "I'm not firing you." Sophia's head shot up in surprise. "You're not?" "No," he replied. "But I am holding you accountable. You'll be removed from active flight duty for the next 6 months and enrolled in our advanced customer relations program. Additionally, you'll be part of a new initiative to address employee well-being and passenger relations. Your insight will be valuable, assuming you're willing to learn from this." Sophia's throat tightened. The offer was both a lifeline and a challenge. She could feel the weight of her pride pushing back, but deep down, she knew this was her chance to turn things around. "I accept," she said finally, her voice resolute. "Thank you for giving me this opportunity." The journey within. The months that followed were some of the most humbling of Sophia's life. The customer relations program was rigorous, combining workshops, role-playing scenarios, and one-on-one coaching. But the most challenging part wasn't the coursework, it was confronting herself. One session, in particular, stood out. It was led by a behavioral psychologist who asked the group to reflect on their personal triggers and biases. "Why do we react the way we do in high-stress situations?" he asked the group. "What past experiences shape the way we see others, and ourselves?" Sophia sat silently, her mind racing. Memories of her early career surfaced, being overlooked for promotions, enduring condescending remarks from passengers and colleagues alike. She had built her tough exterior as a shield, but over time, it had become a prison, isolating her from genuine connection. When it was her turn to speak, Sophia hesitated before finally admitting, "I think I've spent so long trying to prove myself that I've forgotten how to listen, to really listen to people. I see demands instead of needs, conflicts instead of opportunities to help. And I think I'm scared to let my guard down." The psychologist nodded thoughtfully. Awareness is the first step. Now, the question is, how do you rebuild? Building bridges. As part of her rehabilitation, Sophia was required to shadow employees in other roles, including customer service agents and ground crew. These experiences opened her eyes to the complexities of the passenger experience. She watched agents patiently handle irate travelers, ground staff go the extra mile to assist passengers with disabilities, and baggage handlers work tirelessly behind the scenes to ensure smooth operations. One particularly moving moment came when she assisted in coordinating a flight for a young boy with a terminal illness. The boy's family was traveling to fulfill his wish of visiting Disneyland, and Sophia witnessed firsthand the power of compassion and teamwork. By the time her suspension ended, Sophia was no longer the same person. She had shed the rigid armor she once relied on and replaced it with a newfound empathy and openness. The return flight. 6 months after the incident, Sophia returned to active duty. Her first flight was, fittingly, a red-eye to Los Angeles. As she stood at the cabin door, greeting passengers, she felt a mix of nerves and determination. Among the passengers was an elderly woman struggling with her carry-on bag. Without hesitation, Sophia stepped forward, her smile warm and genuine. "Let me help you with that," she said, lifting the bag into the overhead compartment. The woman beamed. "Thank you, dear. It's been a while since I've flown, and these things aren't as easy as they used to be." "It's my pleasure," Sophia replied, feeling a sense of fulfillment she hadn't experienced in years. As the flight progressed, she handled every interaction with care and grace, even when faced with difficult passengers. By the time the plane touched down in Los Angeles, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. An unexpected reunion. As she exited the plane, she was met with a familiar figure waiting at the gate, Elijah Johnson. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice tinged with surprise. "I thought I'd see how you're doing," he said with a smile. Sophia hesitated, then smiled back. "I'm doing better. Thanks to you." Elijah nodded. "Good. Because this isn't just about redemption. It's about making a lasting impact. Are you ready for that?" "I am," Sophia replied firmly. As Elijah walked away, Sophia felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the second chance she had been given, but for the lessons that had reshaped her life. A legacy of change. The terminal was quieter than usual for LAX, with the hum of conversations blending softly into the background. Sophia stood at the gate, her heart lighter than it had been in years. This wasn't just another flight. It was the start of a new chapter, one she had built brick by brick through hard lessons, self-reflection, and an unwavering commitment to do better. As the last passengers boarded, she took a moment to glance at her reflection in the airplane window. The woman looking back at her wasn't just a flight attendant, she was someone who had confronted her mistakes and found strength in vulnerability. The ripple effect of change. A week after her return to active duty, Sophia received an email from the airline's corporate office. Elijah Johnson had personally invited her to join a newly formed committee focused on improving employee training and passenger relations. Sophia hesitated before accepting. Part of her felt unworthy, after all, her own actions had sparked this initiative. But the other part, the part that had grown and evolved, recognized this as an opportunity to make amends in a way that could help others. The first committee meeting was held in a sleek conference room overlooking downtown Los Angeles. Representatives from various departments were present, including customer service, marketing, and even the ground crew. Elijah sat at the head of the table, his presence commanding yet approachable. "Thank you all for being here," Elijah began, his gaze sweeping across the room. "This committee isn't just about addressing what happened 6 months ago. It's about creating a culture where empathy and understanding are as integral to our operations as safety and efficiency." Sophia felt a pang of guilt but quickly pushed it aside. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about the bigger picture. Over the next few months, the committee worked tirelessly, brainstorming ways to improve training programs and foster a culture of kindness within the company. One of their first initiatives was a mandatory empathy workshop for all employees, from pilots to ticket agents. Sophia played a key role in designing the program, drawing from her own experiences to create scenarios that challenged participants to see situations from multiple perspectives. The workshop that changed everything. On the day of the first workshop, Sophia found herself standing at the front of a room filled with airline employees. Her heart pounded as she looked out at the crowd. She had never been much of a public speaker, but this was too important to let fear hold her back. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "My name is Sophia Adams, and I want to start by saying this: I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here because I've been where some of you might be right now, burned out, frustrated, and forgetting why I chose this career in the first place." She paused, letting her words sink in. 6 months ago, I made a mistake that could have ended my career. But more than that, it was a mistake that hurt someone else, a passenger who deserved my respect and compassion. That moment forced me to take a hard look at myself, and what I realized was this: I had stopped seeing people as people. They were problems to solve, complaints to manage, or obstacles to overcome. The room was silent, every pair of eyes fixed on her. But I also learned that it's never too late to change. It's never too late to choose empathy over indifference, understanding over judgment. The workshop included role-playing exercises, where employees had to navigate challenging passenger interactions while maintaining empathy and professionalism. One scenario involved a stressed-out mother with a crying baby, while another focused on a passenger with a hidden disability who struggled to communicate their needs. Sophia moved around the room, offering guidance and encouragement. By the end of the session, several participants approached her to share how the exercises had opened their eyes. A personal gesture. One evening, a few weeks after the workshop, Sophia received a handwritten letter. It was from Elijah Johnson. "Dear Sophia, I wanted to take a moment to thank you, not just for your hard work on the committee, but for the courage you've shown in sharing your story. Your honesty and willingness to grow have inspired not only me, but countless others in this company. You've turned what could have been a career-ending mistake into a powerful lesson for all of us. Keep going. You're making a difference. Warm regards, Elijah." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as she read the letter. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything to her. Bridging the gap. The initiatives Sophia helped implement began to take root across the airline. Employee satisfaction surveys showed a marked improvement, with many citing the workshops as a turning point in their understanding of passenger relations. Passengers, too, began to notice the change. Reviews on social media praised the airline's attentive and compassionate staff. But the most significant moment came during a press event where Elijah unveiled the company's new mission statement, "Flying with Heart, Connecting People Through Kindness." Sophia was invited to speak at the event, and this time, she felt no hesitation. "As someone who once lost sight of what it means to truly connect with people, I'm proud to be part of an organization that's committed to making every interaction meaningful," she said. "Because at the end of the day, kindness isn't just a policy, it's a choice we make every day." A full circle moment. 1 year after the infamous incident, Sophia found herself on another flight, this time as a passenger. She was heading to a leadership conference where she had been invited to speak about the transformative power of empathy in the workplace. As the plane cruised at 35,000 feet, a flight attendant approached her with a warm smile. "Miss Adams," she said, holding out a tray with a cup of tea. "This is on the house. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've done for our airline. Your story really inspired me when I joined last year." Sophia felt a lump in her throat as she accepted the tea. "Thank you," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. Looking out the window at the endless expanse of sky, she reflected on how far she had come. What had started as a moment of shame and regret had transformed into something beautiful, a legacy of change that reached far beyond herself. For the first time in a long time, Sophia felt at peace,